So a weird old weekend. Ministry of Health had about 750,000 people in West and South Auckland, symptoms or no symptoms, out getting a test until we found out it was all a mistake. The Prime Minister is with us. So good morning.
Good morning.
You still angry?
Angry, frustrated, a range of emotions. Mike, I can assure you, if we wanted over 700,000 people to get a test, we wouldn't just leave it to an Instagram or Twitter post. That would be something that we would be sharing openly from the podium. It was a mistake, and full acknowledgement of that.
Wednesday, that information was out there, and also on Friday on your All the Government website. How come it took so long to find this out?
Yeah, I've just heard, of course, some of the reporting of that. I was made aware of it on Sunday morning and acted straight away to raise the issue directly with those who have the ability to remove these things from those platforms. So as soon as I found out, we moved to correct it. We've been utterly consistent from the podium. The issue here is in simplifying some of the messages. They've shared incorrect messages, Mike. No excuse for that. It caused anxiety for people, and for that I apologise. No one wants to see people afraid. No one wanted to see people unnecessarily lining up. But ultimately, it's something that obviously we've corrected, and we'll be making sure the processes don't let us down again.
Why didn't you raise it? Why didn't Hipkins raise it when he was in the media yesterday? Why was it up to the media to raise it?
When you say why didn't Chris raise it when he was in the media yesterday, do you mean...
Say, hey, by the way, while I'm here talking about COVID this morning, Can I just put something out there by way of a correction?
Well, look, all I know is that I was made aware of it at about 10 a.m, I think is the point at which I was made aware of it. For me on the podium yesterday, I probably could have put it into the script. What I was absolutely clear on was I knew in that 45 minutes I would have the chance to correct the record on that. What I wanted to do was put out the actual advice, nice and clear, no question marks over who we were asking to get tested.
But you normally do that so eloquently. You open each 1 p.m. session with I'd just like to start with a few comments. Why wouldn't you start with, by the way, if you've gone out, I would like to correct that right here, right now?
Because, Mike, what I chose to do was share the message on testing that is correct. Then, knowing I spent a full 45 minutes yesterday, I think 50, I knew I'd have a chance to correct the incorrect information. Line call for me, Mike, as to whether I put incorrect information up front into a stand-up, but I knew I'd have the chance to correct the record.
Who's the numpty who did it?
I am going to spend a bit of time making sure that we find out how this happened. It feels to me a little bit at the moment that I don't think that we can place blame on any one person's shoulders. It feels to me like just a series of errors have been made here.
Not systemic failure, surely.
No, I'm not going to claim that here. Just if you give us a chance to just go away and make sure that we see what happened here, because of course we are involving a number of different agencies that are working in the All of Government group to pull together what is a pretty comprehensive response. Obviously an error here has been made. I want to just take the time to make sure we correct it and find exactly what happened.
Is the NZX going to open normally today?
That's my understanding. Obviously, there have been some issues. The GCSB has been directly involved. By and large, I've been leaving any commentary around it to them. They're better placed to speak to what's occurred there.
Robertson spoke publicly for the first time Friday. Was the GCSB involved Tuesday?
They were involved earlier than Friday. I would want to go back and check it from precisely when, though, Mike.
So you don't know if it was Tuesday or Wednesday?
I know it was earlier than Friday. Obviously, a lot was happening last week, so I don't want to put a precise day on it, but I know it was earlier than
Doesn't
Friday.
It concern the government that a major economic instrument of our economy is being held to ransom and nobody seems to do anything about it?
Well, again, I would not say that is a correct assertion at all. Firstly, NZX is a private company, but I absolutely accept what you're saying. It is a crucial part of our economic infrastructure, hence the fact that GCSB, who are best placed given their role in critical infrastructure, is involved. You're asking me for a timeline. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the correct one, Mike.
As far as the farmers are concerned, new freshwater laws, who made those laws up? And I'm talking about the slope of the paddock.
To work on things
pugging.
like, pugging, winter grazing, obviously making decisions around what is reasonable and what is then dipping into a space where you are going to have wider environmental issues. And that is work that's done by the Ministry for the Environment, but very closely with the Ministry for Primary Industries. I can also tell you that our farming leaders have been closely involved in giving us direct feedback. I know, for instance, the likes of my recollection is Dairy NZ, or at least Federated Farmers groups within primary leaders did give us direct advice on their views on pugging and whether or not the depth of that was correct. So we take a range of advice in making those.
Is it too prescriptive? Who literally is wandering through a paddock with a measuring tape looking for 20 centimetres or more?
And look, what we need to do is give guidance. Otherwise, if you give just a general turn of phrase, and in fact, some of the corrections have been, after it's been raised, that it hasn't been sufficient to give guidance as to what's reasonable and what's not. So that's where you've seen a bit more detail being added. And so particularly for things like pugging, making sure that you're taking into account what's reasonable after, weather in particular, and what's dipping into a space where generally, if we're looking at it that level, that depth, we're obviously talking about problems there.
It smacks of a government that doesn't farm a lot.
Why would you say that?
Well, because you're no greater angle than 10 degrees, for goodness. I mean, come on. It's Southland in the middle of winter. It's sopping wet.
And some issues have been, look, I'll just clear up here. There will be plenty of farmers who will recognise that there are some conditions when you have animals grazing in those conditions that it's not appropriate for the animals and therefore the long term. But
the farmer can work that out for themselves because they're farmers.
Indeed, but actually we can't just have, when you're trying to put something into a regulatory environment, you do have to put some description around it. We've worked really hard to make sure it's practical, that it's based on common sense. We've tried to average it out where it makes sense, but we have tried to work very closely with those who are on the ground and who will be implementing them.
Are you confident about TY surviving or staying?
I'm confident that we'll find a way to ease the decision that Rio Tinto's ultimately made here. And so I do think it's in everyone's best interest that we have a managed exit, and that's what we've been working on. It is a commercial conversation, but that is something that we've been working on.
So they're still leaving.
Yes, there's been no suggestion from Rio Tinto that they have changed their mind, but a managed exit is something that I think is in everyone's best interest.
So what are you suggesting? You just drag it out a bit longer?
Just taking the time to make sure that that means it gives a bit of certainty to the workforce, gives a bit of time to make sure that we're making the use of the energy resource that's there. As I say though, Mike, these are commercial negotiations, so I'm going to be a little bit cautious about how much I say on that.
Housing, I was astonished. I didn't know about this. The Ministry of Social Development, this was social housing. They were paying money for rentals, mainly in Auckland, but generally around the country as well, $3,000 a week. How is that possible for a house that's worth $550?
Mike, I can't give you specific details on a specific rental case.
No, there were lots of them.
All cases, as it may be. Happy to speak to it next week if you'd like me to.
So you don't know about this?
What I will say, I can't give you specifics on some of the circumstances under which we're moving into spaces of rentals that are at a higher price point, Mike.
The emergency accommodation scheme, so you put people in motels at up to $120 a night. When you booted them out of the motels, you then went and rented houses per room at $120 a night, thus making the house worth $3,000, and a whole lot of landlords went, hello, I'll go buy myself a whole lot of houses.
And again, as I've just said, Mike, I wouldn't mind just having a little bit more time to dig into what you're talking about here. Of course, we are making big efforts to try and get out of inappropriate accommodation. That means those arrangements where we have those long-term leases with motels, which actually aren't particularly appropriate forms of accommodation, looking at ways that we can save the taxpayer money. In some cases, that has meant purchasing and repurposing that accommodation, so it's a bit more fit for purpose and it saves taxpayers money.
How do you save the taxpayer money when you're paying $3,000 for a house that's worth $550?
And again, I've asked if I can have a bit more time on that one. Instead, I'm talking to the issue around motels, where we have been working to exit. Because, of course, most of the time that's not even appropriate accommodation, let alone the fact that we're paying in a rate that isn't in the taxpayer's interest. We ultimately are focused, of course, on the double goal of making sure people are housed, but also making sure that we're spending taxpayers' money wisely.
All right, let's talk about it more next week when you're up to speed. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern for this Monday morning.